enable access to land for youth as we continue to see how can we enhance the ecosystem to support youth in their agripreneurship journey. So looking forward to this exciting conversation, and thank you so much for those who have joined us. Just a few house rules. Please keep yourself muted if you're not speaking, and also kindly feel free to interact on the chat, to ask questions even as we proceed on. So thank you so much, and welcome to this members group call. My name is Sophie Nabliri. I'm the program coordinator for Generation Africa, and we're really happy to have you here. So I'll introduce my colleague, Henry Lagat, who is the members group call lead, for a brief introduction and opening remarks. Henry, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sophie. We're glad to have all of you here. So Generation Africa Members Group, for those who are coming in for the first time, is a town hall where different organizations that are handling youth issues or tackling youth issues usually meet. And we have one agenda, which is we are trying to strengthen the ecosystem that supports young agripreneurs as they go through, their journey in making their business a success. So we're glad to have you here. And today we are, dealing with an important issue of land. We really hope that we'll be able to, have an opportunity to share. We have Faith from Kenya Land Alliance, so she'll be giving us what they're doing, but we also hope to hear from the rest of you, just to know what kind of interventions are you, implementing in your organizations that is helping the youth access land, and have control over land. With those few remarks, I'd like to welcome Dixon ahead, just to say hi, and then we'll kick off the session. Welcome, Dixon.
Thanks, Henry, and thanks everyone for participating on this call, an important call where the pro-youth organizations always come together to discuss the thorny issues that affect the youth during their journey. And today's particularly is a good one. It's a good one because there are issues of laws that do not favor the youth when it comes to land, issues of customary laws, scarcity of land, degradation of land, which makes it very difficult for the youth. And I think we have the right team to have this discussion. We shall be hearing from the CEO of Kenya Lands Alliance, and then I think we also have a go-getter that has experienced this firsthand, none other than Paul Matovu, 2019 cohort go-getter from Uganda, who will be sharing with us. So mine is also to listen and learn. So have a good time as we move on. So over back to you, Sophie.
Thank you, Henry and Dixon. And yes, we are really looking forward to this discussion. And, even as we continue to see how we can enhance the ecosystem to support youth in their agripreneurship journey, production remains as a key means to economic empowerment and sustainability. And emerging case studies suggest that policy actions and interventions promoting access to land and security of tenure can significantly shape young people's engagement in farming and in livelihood options. So how then do we ensure that youth have access to land and security of tenure? A report was done by IFAD on youth and land tenure. And what it was saying is that access to and control over land is one of the main challenges that young people face in rural areas. For instance, inheritance of land or rights is primarily obtained. The whole aspect of getting land by youth is primarily obtained through inheritance, and then there's a lot of subdivision where we have large families. So what it leads to is fragmented and unviable land parcels, yeah? And then we also have the challenge where you have cases where the land is owned by the community. So decisions on its use are generally taken by the older generation, for whom young people's interests are not a primary concern. So then again, the young agripreneur does not have control or is able to speak to the use of the land. So subsequently, you know, it has been noted that landlessness among rural youth is a primary cause of migration to urban areas in search of alternative sources of income. So we'll be tackling how do we address some of these challenges, and we have very exciting speakers. We are really honored to have them. We have Paul Matovu, who was one of our go-getters, and he is the founder and CEO of vertical and micro gardening, and we'll get to hear from him as a young agripreneur. What are the challenges he's faced in this whole area around land acquisition? And we also have Faith Alubbe, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Land Alliance, and just to hear what are they doing in their space to address some of these challenges. So I'll start us off with Paul Matovu. If you could kindly put on your camera, just introduce yourself, give us a brief background of yourself, and then share with us some of the challenges that you have experienced in this whole area of access of land. How have you overcome them, or you continue to overcome them? And, you know, what are some of the things that you think that can be done to be able to address some of these issues? Paul, welcome. Paul, I don't know if you can hear me.
Thank you, Sophie. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, please carry on.
Okay, my network is bad. I'll just switch on later, if that's okay. Yeah, as I introduced, my name is Paul Matovu, and I am the CEO and founder of Vertical and Micro Gardening. We particularly specialize in developing urban farming vessels to enable people living in urban communities to grow their own food. Today's topic is quite interesting to me because it touches me personally, because I've been there and I've experienced the challenges of land acquisition that we face as young people, but also as a company, given that we work with young people, trying to help them acquire land, but also to practice farming generally. I understand that there are very many challenges, very many hindrances to land acquisition. So the first thing, I try to get land for my company about 3-4 years ago, and I think, you know, the first and most important thing is for us to understand that land in Africa is costly. It is not as cheap as people think. So before we discuss the other constraints that are hindering young people in Africa from acquiring land, we have to first think about the cost. We know that over 60% of Africa's population, young people below the age of 35, and most of these young people are not employed. So with a situation where we have many unemployed young people, and for cases where we have young people who are employed, we don't have minimum wage in some countries. For instance, in Uganda, the bill was tabled, but we don't have any law regarding that. So if young people are earning very little money with the increasing prices of land, you know, without even considering the other factors like customary constraints and the lack and inadequate knowledge regarding land use rights, the cost of land is the first thing that we have to think about, and then ask ourselves, do the young people have the resources, the financial resources to procure land? And then after answering this question, because that's the question that we had as VMG, myself, wanted to buy a plot with, close to the city, and the cost of acquiring a plot of 50 by 100 feet was beyond what I had ever imagined, and I had never made that kind of money in one for all my life. For all the years I had worked, So we had to work longer to be able to acquire a small plot of 50 by 100. And when we eventually went to buy that land, there were a lot of things that I learned, and I think other young people need to think about. One are the policies, but also the rights of landowners. With the current markets, I don't know if it's only in Uganda or in other countries as well, the land sale, purchase, but also the rental market is not very organized and regulated. So under such circumstances, it becomes very, very hard for you to know if you're being ripped off. For instance, if you're paying a very high price, you don't know the policies, rather the procedures, you don't know the steps you have to take to acquire a land title. And we end up spending a lot of money in the legal process of getting the land that we buy. The other problem we face after buying the land is that there are very many, these days they're called big people, big people in government, big people in cultural institutions who are doing their best to grab our land. And, it's a painful process acquiring the land, but also a painful process maintaining it. The land that we first bought, for instance, the person who sold it to us never told us that part of that land was belonging to the government. I don't know how that happened. We did a search and the land was okay, there wasn't any problem. After a long time, we discovered that a small portion of that land was a caveat for the government, for the National Environment Management Authority. And then principally, I can't own land in a place that's not supposed to be reserved for environmental purposes. So it became very hard. We lost some money because of such issues. So knowing and understanding how the system works, when to do the search, how do you search and see who is the rightful owner of the land, whether there are any encumbrances on the land or not, and how to go around those issues are things that we as young people are not very aware about. In the country where I come from, I think the easiest way for you to know them is when you experience them. So you learn by experience. The other problem is, that young people are facing with land acquisition is more about integrity. And when we talk about integrity, we are talking about the law practitioners, the lawyers themselves, because we rely on the legal process to help us acquire the land. And then the lawyers that we use are not, most of them, their integrity is very questionable because they are going to intentionally put you in a trap or make you lose your money because for them, their interest is for you to pay them. And not only lawyers, but we have people that they call the valuers. We have people that work in these lands offices. So once, if that integrity is not something that is addressed and worked upon, it's still going to be hard for us as young people who are struggling. We don't have enough money to go, to go through all these legal battles. And, the old people who are established, they know how to fight these battles. They have the money. They know who to call. We don't know anyone in government. We don't know anyone in big positions. But anyway, it shouldn't be an issue of who to call, who to speak to. It should be a clear process that's very, very well regulated, where we all know what should be done. I think for fellow young people, the other thing I will talk about is perception. So our company particularly focuses on helping people utilize the small spaces that they have. What we have found very, very common among fellow young people is that we still have these dreams, these thoughts of owning big chunks of land. Remember that land is shrinking very fast because of the population increase, but also big chunks of land are being given away to foreign investors. So as young people, if we still wish and want to own big chunks of land, big acres of land, that's going to be a very, very hard thing to achieve. So my recommendation to fellow young people is change our perception. Let us, first of all, understand what it takes to acquire land and start the perception of owning acres of land, owning miles of land, is something that's deterring most young people from starting small. And I mean, we all know that if you really want to own something, you have to start small. So perception is something that's supposed to be worked upon. And lastly, what I will mention are the, related to rights and all that. These are land governance issues. The last thing I want to talk about is land governance. Young people most times are not involved in land governance issues. When they're making land reforms or land redistribution exercises, it's unusual that you're going to find young people involved. Yet we have concerns as young people. We also have very good contributions that we can make, but we also understand our own circumstances, and we would like those to be reflected in the reforms, but also in all the policies that governments and other cultural institutions that have control over land make, because these reforms, these laws and policies affect us directly, and therefore working and creating an inclusive environment that engages young people is going to be something that's super helpful. With that, I would like to say thank you so much, and I look forward to learning more from other submissions from other participants. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, so much for that contribution and just sharing with us some of the personal challenges that you have experienced in this whole area of access to land for the youth. At this point, I want to welcome Faith. Faith, we've heard from our young agripreneur. He's talked of limited resources, the youth not being involved in land governance issues and reforms and the decision making around that. He's talked about the whole aspect of understanding the legal process of acquiring land. So maybe you could, give us first a brief background of yourself, and then, just tell us what it is that you're doing in your space to address some of these challenges that our youth are facing to access land. Welcome, Faith.
Thank you so much. Indeed, my name is Faith Alubbe. I'm a human rights lawyer and a land justice activist for the last, this is my 17th year. Started in 2006 at the Federation of Women Lawyers, then moved to Kenya Human Rights Commission, then to Kenya Land Alliance. I'll be making a presentation. Maybe I'll be able to maybe touch on the issues that have been raised. And if not, I think we will discuss at the end of the presentation. But it's a pleasure to be here. Kenya Land Alliance is an organization, a melting pot of sorts, which brings together members that work on land. Land in our constitution is what is beneath what we work on, surface where we work on, and above, like renewable energy, like wind, like solar, that is land. And all these are natural resources. So when you're talking about land, we have avenues which youth can be able to access some form of economic empowerment, including extractives and renewable energy and agriculture. So we have options. So as I've said, Kenya Land Alliance has 3 or 4 organizational strategic objectives. We support social movement of land marginalized groups like the indigenous persons, women, people who are able differently to access land. We also advocate for a democratic framework for management of community land. As we understand in Kenya, 70% of our land is communally held land that is unregistered. Currently, it's being registered under an act that was enacted in 2016, the Community Land Act of 2016. And it's a space that they're encouraging the youth and women to occupy. But as we've known, the generational exclusion of women and land and of women and youth from land governance is still working against them. And then we do research to contribute to the body of knowledge and strengthen KLA as an organization. Into my presentation, in Kenya, if you look at the census, 2019 census, agriculture has been touted as one of the sectors that can absorb the youth bulge that we have right now. In Kenya, it is estimated we have 10 million youths, And out of the 10 million youths, a very negligible percentage can claim to have a stable source of income. 70% to 75% of this youth derive their income from the informal employment. This is as per the Kenya National Bureau. Sorry? As per the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, they have a report, that the economic survey report that they release every year. They also go on and say that almost 78% aged before 34 years they are not friendly, or they are not accustomed to the idea that they can actually earn a living from land. So there is some sort of apathy between the youth and land, as much as it's a form of identity and a cultural, intergenerational gift that parents give to their children. There is a gap, a knowledge gap between the youth and an older generation on how to use land to earn a living. I don't know if it is patience. I don't know if it is the barriers that exist, policy barriers that exist, that actually hinder the youth from following that discussion. The youth population in Kenya, as I've said, is almost 10 million. The ILO estimates that despite the annual GDP of more than 5%, Kenya's youth unemployment rate shows no development. So as we talk, 22% of the youth that are spoken about do not have any form of employment, formal or informal. That is according to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. Those are very serious statistics, because it means for these youth to earn a living, they are looking for more creative ways to do that. It is also estimated that between 500 and 800,000 young Kenyans enter the job market each year. So if you're talking about 500,000 and you have 10 million youths, there is still a huge demand that is not being addressed. So just to understand what land is, what is land? Just to understand what land is, as I've said, land is what is, according to Article 260, is what is beneath and above. And for us, that is very important, because when it comes to negotiations around land, we should acknowledge that we are losing use of what is beneath, we are losing use of what is above. We might negotiate, especially in mega projects, where right now in Kenya, every other infrastructural project needs some acquisition of land. We might be negotiating for surface rights, but we also should acknowledge that we are losing use of the water bodies around our environment. We are losing the fresh air. We are using all these should be in one package as we negotiate. So what are some of the cross-cutting barriers to women land rights and youth access to land? Access to information. As we speak right now, the concessions that have to do with any investment, especially mega projects, is not public information. As we speak, if you want to have an idea what a concession talks about, and just to point out the agribusiness, large scale like Unilever, like Finleys, like this huge agri-business that employ very many youths, that concession is not available. We also do not have the policy architecture to understand how royalties that are remitted by these agricultural farms, how are they disbursed back to the communities? What are the benefits that communities accrue from having such huge agricultural farms in their locality? There's the issue of multiplicity of laws, land being a multifaceted issue. You get for someone to be able to claim an entitlement, you have to have an idea what the Constitution says, and then it depends on what kind of land you're living on. In Kenya, we have public land, which is government land for public purposes. We have community land, we have private land. So if you are on private land, then you have to have an idea what the Constitution says, what the Land Registration Act says, because it talks about private land. If you're living on communally held land, then you have to have an idea on what the Community Land Act 2016 talks about. If you're a woman, then you have to go to Matrimonial Property Act. And then all of us have to understand what the Physical Planning Act talks about, and then we have to, if it's in compensation, I've demonstrated how the multiplicity of laws is good, but it's becoming a barrier, especially to youth and women, because you have to look at various pieces of legislation to claim an entitlement. Retrogressive cultural practices have been mentioned. Abuse of power by local level officers is there. You might get that youths are told it's not your time to own land yet, and the local administration supports that position. Or women are told, why should a woman talk about land? Wait until when all elders are going to tell you you can earn, you can live on this, you can earn a living on this piece of land, then you will be able to earn land. You'll be able to manage land. That is abuse of power, and it happens quite a lot. Even in instances where there is cases of speculation, if a mega project is passing through an area, officials might have prior knowledge and use that knowledge to acquire land and deny women and youth the right to acquire such land because of the prices that are not friendly, as it has been mentioned. The legal processes are lengthy, adversarial, and technical. So mostly the courts are not the favorite places to go access remedy. There is weak enforcement and implementation of the law. And that's why mostly youth and women are locked out of some of these processes. Political goodwill, it depends, and it's relative. Like, we are almost in the electioneering period. Politicians are going to even do roadside declarations over some things that they cannot deliver. And the youths are going to believe them, and women are going to believe them. Then 1 year down the lane, land was used as a campaign tool. It becomes now an instigator of violence. Cost of land has been mentioned, low literacy level, legal illiteracy actually is what is the problem. It ties with multiplicity of laws. Historical injustice is also a huge issue because in Kenya, historical land injustices have never been resolved well, and some of the lands are still affected by colonial legacies. Like lands along coastal region, they are still affected by colonial legacies. So youths in these areas cannot even own land because according to policy, most of that land is government land and it's a colonial legacy, and they cannot own land. They can only be squatters. Rural to urban migration, that has been talked about. Skewed compensation initiatives, as I've spoken about, whereby they're very relative. There is no clear policy architecture. So it is one project varies from another, but even that said, there's also the issue of ethnicity and influence, political influence. Restricted access to water, pasture, and other resources from these community lands is also an issue that is a barrier to agriculture. It's something that it needs a collaborative approach to deal with. Intergenerational conversations, they're important, but they never happen anymore. Insecure tenure for youths and women is also an issue. This is just a conceptual framework of why it's important for women to own land, economic benefits and social political benefits. Economic benefits include land-based income, agricultural production, land rental sales and income, increased whole farm income generating opportunities. Social political benefits include you have women who have access to land, to own land, because the bundle of rights is usually limited to access and use. Women rarely own or control. So most of the time we encourage women to explore or take advantage of whatever bundle of rights they have. So the social political benefits include a bigger voice in the household level, reduced GBV. These are researches that have been done. So the legislative framework, I'll not go into it so much, but of importance is that the Kenyan Constitution has principles, Article 10 and Article 60, that talk more about principles that should be used on the basis of land governance. They are rarely used because principles like participation, transparency, inclusion, equitable distribution of resources, those are some of the principles that should be looked at when dealing with land governance, and they are rarely used. Article 2.4 of our Constitution talks about retrogressive culture, culture that locks out women from owning land, culture that locks out youth from owning land, because it is said that, wait, land will be handed down to you, or wait, land will be given to you. But such culture and such integrative practices are forbidden by Article 2.4 of our Constitution. Article 22 of our Constitution talks about third-party interest. NGOs can actually report such infringements of human rights to a remedy-seeking process. We can represent such people. Article 40 of our Constitution talks about anybody being able to live anywhere in this country. With the upcoming electioneering period, I know there's talk of everybody to go back to their ancestral lands, which is a breach of the Constitution. And mostly it's the youth who are used against other youths to chase the visitors or the ones who are not indigenous. And that is usually breached by us ourselves. And the government has not been able to really control that. So that is also a threat to youth access to land. You can imagine if a youth has an investment and that is the period when they're being told to leave, like what happened in 2007, 2008. Article 48 talks about access to justice, and Article 60 I've spoken about principles. Matrimonial property, because some youths are using land as matrimonial property, and the matrimonial property, the way they use it is the agricultural land. In essence, we have a Matrimonial Property Act of 2013, which I will not go into, but it provides for protection of the matrimonial property. It provides for ownership of matrimonial property against it being used as collateral without consent from both spouses, which is very important. There's equal status of spouses, that is Article 45 of our Constitution, and also Matrimonial Property Act talks about that for both youths and women and communities at large. The idea of contribution is very key, because in the event of division of matrimonial property, the definition of contribution is never let down. Like when you're talking about movable property, we have immovable and movable property. Some of the movable property includes plants, agriculture, things that you're waiting that once they mature, we'd be able to sell and divide the money or such. So contribution, the aspect of contribution really comes in when we're talking about division of matrimonial property. Acquisition of interest by contribution is also a key issue, especially when a youth, when he was single, he was operating, let's say, 10 greenhouses, and now they are married. We have to define what is matrimonial property and what is not. And in case of division of matrimonial property, how does that go? There are other interlinking issues that Kenya Land Alliance has noticed affects what is happening to access to land and agriculture in general. The FTAs, the small-scale farmers who are the youth and women, are being affected by the FTAs, but do not understand the content of the FTAs. They did not understand the content of AGOA, yet it really affected them, because most of these agreements, almost 50 to 60% of these agreements, affect small-scale farmers. There's the investment in land and investor protection provision under the FTAs. But do the right holders understand how these agreements affect them? Environmental justice issues, there are areas where unfriendly chemicals are used, and you get that youths are affected without knowing what is affected them. So environmental justice issues and climate justice questions still arise. The youth livelihoods and local content policy gaps. Most of the time, youth issues are not considered in local content. They're just, let's say, recipients of policies that they are not part of, and that is a problem, especially in the extractive sector, in the agricultural sector. That is a discussion that should be had. Security of community land rights defenders, the exposure of people who raise the alarm of whistleblowers is usually an issue. What can be done? There should be a system that ensures the youth and women, specifically those who are vulnerable and marginalized, engage in the relevant education and training in agriculture, build skills, and land governance. We can do this through youth agripreneurs campaigns. There's also the issue that we can ensure that young people and their communities have access to adequate food and nutritious, that is of nutritious quality. And in this context, you can think about communities that are dependent on some sort of economy, let's say the pastoralist economy. such communities are very disadvantaged because climate change has changed their way of living. So how do they then get food security? How do they then realize nutritious quality of food? That is something, that's a pertinent question that we need to ask ourselves. We can encourage diversification of crop portfolios. That is something that can be done, but with enough knowledge and inclusion so that a constituency is not left out in that conversation. There is need to invigorate the youth constituency to demand for their own space. No one is going to hand them anything. They have to understand, claim, and demand their own space. Positioning of the inclusion of youth constituency in policy dialogues is something that we cannot overemphasize. That is very important. Building capacity among us, the youth, in various issues. As I've said, there's the option of agriculture, that is the surface, but there's also extractives and there's renewable energy, and those are spaces that we can occupy. Development of establishment of youth information hubs, that can also work to disseminate correct information because it's scarce. Policy dialogues, I've spoken about them. Impact assessments where we measure what are the milestones so that we do not have beautiful pieces of legislation that are not implemented, thus they do not really favor or they do not really benefit the right holders. Development of disintegrated data, of gender disintegrated data, that's very important because it helped in policy formulation. We do not have that. How many women own land? How many, the number of youth can say that they own land? Kenya Land Alliance did a study in 2017. Out of the 3.2 titles that have been issued by the Jubilee government, only 1% of women own land individually. 6% of the 3.2 own land jointly. We did not analyze the number of youths that can claim they own land individually out of the 3.2 million titles that have been issued from 2013 to 2017. Public participation is a principle that we cannot ignore. But it's become relative and it's become very arbitrarily done to a point where it's being abused. So the youth have to be educated to understand the importance and how to engage. As I conclude, there's need for research and policy, conduct market research so that youth can be engaged in an industry where they understand the sector. This can be done through youth social movements, and just to engage the system because there's so much against them. When they come together, they'll have a louder voice. They can amplify their voices. Conduct formative and secondary research for extant policies to inform and develop youth-inclusive policies in agriculture. That calls for a collaborative approach. Academia, non-state actors, state actors, and the youth themselves. They should be able to render their voices as well in the development of solutions. So I'd like to end there, but I'd like to end with a question where I'm asking, as actors who are in this space, how then do we ensure that even as we talk, as we support youth to gain more, how do we make sure that the youth do not act against their own self-interests? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Faith, for that very insightful and very comprehensive background on some of the challenges that are faced by the youth. It's interesting, some of these things do cut across. You spoke of cost of land, you spoke of political goodwill, you spoke of historical injustices. And these are some of the things that Paul also brought up, as he shared his own challenges in that space as a young entrepreneur. I want to open up the floor to members on the call. We've heard from Faith, we've heard from Paul. I want to open the floor just for us to share some of our experiences. I know we're representing different organizations here from different regions. We've sort of had case studies from Uganda, from Kenya, but just to hear, from the organizations that are presented here, what are some of your experience and insights you have faced in this whole area of land acquisition by youth, and what are some of the interventions that you are employing so that you're able to assist our young entrepreneurs in this journey? So opening the floor for, please feel free to unmute and speak. You can put up your hand and I'll choose you. Yes, Edson. Thank you. Please proceed.
Yes, thank you very much, colleagues. I mean, those are some great presentations by Paul and Faith. I've also got my colleague whom I've invited to participate in this, Maria Mariale, who's the land officer at the bank. She might talk a bit later more about at the policy level. But for me, since I work directly with the youth, I really listened carefully to what Paul was talking about. And sometimes I advise youth, directly. Paul did indicate that it is very expensive, one, to buy or to rent land, close to the city. So in considering that, I know that if you go, obviously being close to the city is very, very important, for being proximity to the markets. But one thing that I advise youth, maybe sometimes it makes a bit more sense to go a bit further outside the city, and then there, you find that the cost of land, especially renting, I'm not talking about buying here because that is very complex, but even renting land, even if it's for, 2-3 years or 5 years or so, it's much, much, much cheaper. You find that the cost reduces, substantially. And what the youth might want to do is now to actually put the processing at the farm level, then that way, once, you get your crops, or whatever, enterprise you have, you process, the crops there, and then after that, bring it to the city to market, you have a bit more time. That is one aspect. The other one aspect is starting small. I think Paul mentioned that. I think it's very, critical for youth. Because sometimes people think about, 5-10 hectares. It doesn't sound like much, but once you look at the type of investment that is required to make that land produce, even just 1 hectare, it's really a substantive amount of resources to make sure that you can. So you might rent 10 hectares, but you won't have the resources to develop even half of that. So I think it's critical really to begin to learn to begin small, with what you can manage, and then grow from there, as you get experience, as you have more resources, etc. So those are just a couple of suggestions I wanted to bring out that are very relevant, I think, for the youth. Thank you.
You're on mute, Sophie.
Sorry. Thank you so much for that, Edson. I also see Marie, your hand is up. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clear.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation, Edson. Thank you so much. I just wanted to add on what Edson has said, specifically on as a contribution to the first presenter and the second presenter on what can we do to make sure that we ensure that youth are being provided their rights to access, even to have, to use and control some of the investments that they do on land. I'll just give one experience we had with one of the Southern African countries, Malawi. Malawi is one of the countries which have undergone a lot of policy development and also new laws and regulations. And the critical aspect within this particular area, whereby you'll find all these policies which are related to land, as well as the laws and regulations, are clearly indicating that the youth have the rights, and they stipulate on the processes whereby youth will be able to acquire access and have rights to land. However, the decision makers and the implementers, specifically on traditional authorities, you'll find they are not aware on how to implement such directives which are in the laws and regulations. So what we did was to develop a program which will take into consideration capacitating these local authorities and traditional authorities, specifically traditional leaders, to make them understand that, okay, we involved you in the development of these policies, and you had you did agree that these are the way. I mean, it's a way to take further the issues of access to land for youth, but the implementation has to be undertaken. And this is how we can work together in implementing. So the issue of capacitating or creating awareness of traditional authorities is critical, specifically in areas whereby youth are involved in agriculture, in agricultural activities. Another area which I wanted to contribute is on taking this particular topic in isolation. Maybe causes more obstacles, specifically when we look at land as in isolation from other intervention or other policies or other strategies. I would like to look at the issue of developing national strategies for youth. This is an opportunity for youth to come in, whether it's in movement or in any other way, to be there and address the obstacles which are related to land through these strategies. So I think it's an opportunity for youth to come in, because we know the centrality of land. Land touches everything, but it's an opportunity to come up with some of the ways of resolving these obstacles in such strategies which are nationally developed within a certain country, whereby all other sectors are being integrated into these strategies. This is what I wanted to contribute at the moment. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maria, for sharing your insights with us. Do we have any other contributions? Yes, please proceed, Jean.
Thanks, Sophie, and thanks, Faith, for for sharing with us insights on Kenya land reforms. Excuse me. My name is Jean Mwenda. I am the global lead. I work with SNV in The Hague. I want to agree with some of the things that have been said by Paul, by Faith, and even also by the last two speakers, that the issues on land and what we see across SNV portfolio in the countries where we are working is they are cross-cutting. So the issues we hear about land access for youth and women in Kenya or Uganda are not so different from what we see in Mali or in any other country in Southern Africa. I also do agree with Marielle that in most of these countries, it's not lack of policies. It's actually the implementation of the policies and coordination of that is the main topic that we really need to look at into, I mean, as implementing partners to see how these things can be addressed more coherently and concretely and sustainably. You've asked, how do we go about addressing some of those things then and promoting entrepreneurship opportunities amongst young people, even when they do not have access to land. From SNV perspective, I mean, there are several things we are doing, but what I can mention, two of them to start with, is that we're encouraging young people to venture into off-farm employment opportunities, so not necessarily on-farm, but off-farm, and looking at mapping out those opportunities within the different agricultural value chains, and then tapping into those, and also trying as much as possible to work in groups, as well as contract farming, and of course linking them up with the private sector market, so then their businesses are sustainable. I wanted to raise a quick question to Faith on what role does she see, or the Kenya Land Alliance, what do they see as the role of the Ministry of Education, because I've had a talk about, lack of knowledge or knowledge gap amongst young people on land use, land rights, and she's talked about other interventions and recommendations, but I have not had in mention of the Ministry of Education. When does she see them playing a role, and how can that be done? Also on the continuing land subdivision in some of the countries, which actually has implications on land and food security in African countries. What are some of the government interventions to ensure that agriculture land remains agriculture land and is accessible to those that are willing to make use of it economically? Thank you, Sophie. You're muted. Mm-hmm.
I need to stop talking to myself. But thank you so much for that. And we have also noted, I have noted your questions to Faith. Maybe I'll just take one more from Valentine Miheso, and then we can proceed to Faith to answer the questions that you have raised.
Okay. So, and thanks for the very good, presentation. But as I was listening, my head was spinning a little bit, and this is why. So the issue of land is not new. We've been working, and the organizations that have been working on land issues since independence in 1963. What is the chance of us succeeding? Probably another 10, 20 years. Why can't we look at it from a different perspective? And this is my reasoning. So we have some young farmers who literally do not own an inch of land. And what they have done is they've become innovative. They lease land, they farm, and they make money. So, and I'm not saying that we don't do it, but I'm saying, even as much as we are looking at land laws, policy implementation, and so on, instead of our youth being stuck and waiting for this environment to work, shouldn't we be encouraging our youth to be more innovative? Because there are many ways to, skin a rat. So that's one. Number two, and this has been raised by our colleague at SNV. I think also when we are engaging youth in terms of their engagement in agriculture, it's just not around productivity, because land then limits youth to productivity, and yet that is not the only area they can be applying their practices. So I think what I'm trying to present is to say, look, land is critical, it is important, but let's not get stuck at that point. As much as we're engaging the youth, we should be innovative and find other ways of ensuring that the youth are accessing land to produce through leasing, but also they engage in other activities that are supportive to agriculture. Over.
Thank you, Valentine. Interesting twist there, yeah, on how do we encourage youth in other areas of creativity. Faith, back to you. There was this question that was raised by Jean. I don't know if you captured, but it was one, how do we engage with the Ministry of Education in the whole area of creating awareness? And then there was what are the government interventions on the subdivision of land? Jean, I hope I got this right. And how do we protect some of the farming land? Please proceed, Faith.
Thank you very much. I'll start with the first one. Yes, the Ministry of Education has a very big role, and Kenya Land Alliance has been engaging various actors in ensuring, first of all, public schools are protected, because most of the lands that were being grabbed belonged to public institutions. That is number one. And in some areas, especially in the marginalized areas, you get that the teachers and the principals are the epitome of authority. They are the ones who parents listen to. So the Ministry of Education has a very big role. It's quite unfortunate that they are not formally acknowledged in documents when role allocation is being handed over to ministries. In fact, the Ministry of Education is rarely given any component on creation of awareness around land justice issues. But as an innovative way of doing activism, we know that teachers and FBOs are one of the surest dissemination strategies. And we've had a program that just targeted teachers for them to understand and disseminate. The issue of subdivision of agricultural land, it is ongoing. It's very worrying. In Kenya right now, we have a number of processes that are ongoing. It is advantageous, but it's also a disadvantage for Kenyans because right now there's digitization of land registries or land records that is ongoing. Nairobi has been digitized already. There is a target of like maybe 20 to 24 counties by 2022 of the digitization process. There's a registration of communally held lands. History has shown us that once the communities get some form of titles and proof of ownership, they normally rush to sell, like the case of Kajiado. So it's a danger that is ongoing. The third process is spatial planning that is ongoing in most of the counties. Most counties are zoning their land and planning it. This is agricultural area, this utilities area, this is whatever is happening. But the counties, there's a disconnect between what the counties is doing and what the counties are doing and what the government is doing. Because most of the conversations, when you're in the county space, you just see county governments. When you're in national government space, you just see national government, National Land Commission, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Mining and Petroleum. We rarely see that interconnection and interlinkages, and the interface is not very sound, let me use that word. So there is need to protect agricultural land. There is need also to just come out and talk about the minimum and maximum acreage. That is a provision of our constitution, in our constitution, which has been ignored because of lack of political goodwill and the fact that most of the old guards, families, grabbed so much land to a point where they would not, and they're the ones in power. Let's call it as it is. They do not want us to start talking about minimum and maximum acreage of land in Kenya. So you get that indigent people prefer, even if they get a point of land, just a point, just that small portion where they can plant skuma, then they'd be satisfied. But in the long run, that is harmful for land use. And then the last question around Valentin. I agree with you. I agree with you. We need to be more innovative. Land is finite. It does not stretch. And the population is growing. So there is need for more innovation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Faith. There's a comment we have. Somebody saying there's legislation in Kenya allowing women and girls to inherit land. And so she's just wondering if there's been an analysis on how this has gone along. You know, has there been an uptake? Is there increased access to land by female gender? Or are there cultural barriers or issues holding them back from claiming this right for, for acquisition of land?
Yes, we have the law and it allows women to inherit land. As I've said, Article 2.4 prohibits cultural practices that are not consistent with the Constitution. Article 100 talks about youth inclusion. Article 27 talks about discriminatory practices should be prohibited, especially on the basis of gender or age. So there is the law. We are very beautiful pieces of legislation. The problem has always been enforcement of the law, awareness of the law by the right holders so they cannot claim a right they do not know. The policies and the procedures are not very clear. As Paul spoke about, the issue of searches and acquisition of land. I can tell you that right now in Kenya, there are some areas that the Green Book, the one with the mother titles, is so messed up to a point where even a policy directive might not really be able to sort it out. And then very high, very low literacy levels also affects land ownership. Most women need a third party to read for them very private documents, which then transfers the power to this third party. And it depends with how that party would take it, because most of them are conned through that. And then the issue of having very complex documentation, lengthy adversarial judicial processes and succession processes are still processes that hinder women from from owning and controlling land, but we still use and access. That is a given. As I've said, KLA, we did an audit of 3.2 million titles that have been issued by the current government. And it was sad to note only 1% of 3.2 million reflected that women had only women names on those titles, while 6% reflected that there is joint ownership with some man, husband or brother or whatever, but the rest, the names were just individual men. So yes, we have laws, but enforcement is a challenge.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for that. We have come to the end of our Q&A section. Anyone with any burning last comment?
There's one more comment in the chat from Marjorie.
Thank you, Amanda. Yes, Marjorie, that is well noted. Okay. Thank you so much. This has been such an interesting discussion. I wish we had more time. I'm sure there's a lot that we would, still be able to talk about and delve into. So at this point, I want to welcome my colleague Henry to just come in and tell us, give us the next steps. But again, just to say thank you so much for the insightful contributions. We will share the notes and the recording of this call, so that we can keep improving on some of these interventions that we have spoken about as we continue to work with our young agripreneurs in their journey of agripreneurship. So thank you so much and welcome, Henry.
Thank you very much, Sophie, for that wonderful session. And I'd like to thank all the participants. This is our last call for this year. And from the way I'm seeing things, it seems like it's either we need more time or this is an issue that we really need to again look at it and see then in terms of alternatives, how then do we enable the youths have this access, noting from what you've said. So the next steps, number one, just a few announcements. So currently Generation Africa is in Rwanda doing the youth ecosystem development work. We're implementing the EDF, which is Ecosystem Development Framework for Youth in Ag. We hope we shall be relaying the results. We hope to get the mapping results very soon. But we will share that with the group once we have that. Also, from the last competitions that we had this year, that's the Generation Africa, GoGettaz Agripreneurship Prize Competition and the Pitch Agri Hack. We had 25 finalists. Generation Africa is currently on the tail end of coming up with a fellowship program in which all these 25 high finalists of the two competitions will be taken through some form of acceleration and hub, and then linked to different business support services, including investment. So if there's any member here who feels like they want to be part of this journey, we are looking for mentors, we are looking for partner institutions offering different services so that we can see then how do we grow these high potential SMEs who are youth to be quite successful. So that's all from my end. As for next year, we have 6 calls. The first one will be in February. If there's any organization that feels like they would want to work with us on that call, please kindly reach me on membersgroup@generationafrica.org and we shall organize those sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. I'll call Amanda to close for us.
Thank you, Sophie, for inviting me. I've had quite an exciting time learning a lot from Faith, a lot from Paul. So a special thank you to our speakers who made this discussion lively and engaging. And of course, to our members, that is each and every one of you here who's made time to attend. We had a very lively Q&A that was invigorating. Thank you very much for sparing your time to attend our event. And I'd just like to echo what Henry said, that this is an ongoing discussion. We have periodic calls touching on different thematic areas, and I've put the email address in the chat. So if you're not yet a member of Generation Africa, please do so by sending an email to us at genafrica.org. You can just check the chat over there, and also join the Generation Africa community platform. And also I've put the link in the chat. So once again, thank you to each and everyone, and I'll hand the reins back to Sophie.
We've come to the end of our call. So thank you again so much, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon, the rest of your day, and looking forward to engaging with you soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for a good job.
Bye,
Thanks,
and thanks for the wonderful discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.